talk about consonants. In this periodic table of the elements, which you may remember from high school, all of these elements are laid out in a systematic way. If you know where an element is located, its column gives you important information about that element and its nature, and its place in the row also gives you important information about the element and its nature. And the groupings in this chart kind of allow us to make predictions and to notice similarities between different chemicals. You could think of this part of the IPA as being a periodic table of the consonants. So these consonants are arranged in columns, and each of these columns tells us about where in the mouth it is articulated, with two lips in the bilabial all the way back to way deep in the throat, glottal consonants. The rows tell us something about the manner of the articulation. Is it nasal, through the nose? Is it plosive, two things coming together for a complete stop and then releasing, like p, t, t, k, k. A trill, r, r, r. So these places and manners will kind of give us the coordinates of a consonant. What makes a consonant different from a vowel? With a vowel, the sound is completely unobstructed. Just the sound comes out of you. Ah, you, ah. So obviously the tongue moves for different vowels. You get different vowel positions, different qualities. But for the most part, the air just comes out completely unblocked, maybe a little bit channeled, but not blocked at all. Consonants, on the other hand, involve a blockage. The language with the fewest consonants in the world is Hawaiian, which has ma, na, pa, a consonant which is in some dialects pronounced as t and others as k, but there's never a contrast between t and k. A consonant which is somewhere between wa and v, which is why people say Hawaii, which sounds a little bit like a wa and a v and the consonant l. There is an extinct language called Obli, which still exists in the records, which had the record for the number of consonants for human language with 84 consonants. You think English was crazy. And this would be the table for all of the consonants in the Obli language. What do we need to describe a consonant? Well, you can think of a consonant as having three coordinates, sort of like an x-coordinate, a y-coordinate, and a z-coordinate. It's got a place of articulation, so where in the vocal tract, where in the mouth does some kind of blockage happen. That sort of blockage or constriction is what we call articulation. Is the consonant voiced or not? And then more detail about the manner of articulation. What kind of a blockage is it? Is it complete blockage, sort of a partial blockage? Does it start out complete and then become partial? This is a map of the vocal tract. So all of the different pieces that we're going to need to talk about. So we have the lips here, which are two lips would be bilabial sounds. Labiodental, bottom lip to the top teeth. A dental sound would be the tongue is touching the tooth or going out between the two teeth. Alveolar sounds would be where the tongue is going to this alveolar ridge here. The tongue tip would be going up there. Palatal sounds would be where the tongue is touching up at the top of the mouth. Velar sounds, where the tongue is touching the velum, the soft palate. Uvular, the little hangy ball that you sometimes see in cartoons, the thing that dangles from the top of your mouth, is the uvula, would be the tongue is touching there. Pharyngeal sounds, the back of your tongue is going up against the back wall of your throat. Epiglottal sounds would be where this little flap, the thing that puts food down to the stomach and keeps air going to your lungs. If that's touching, then it's an epiglottal sound. And then we have glottal sounds where the vocal cords themselves are doing something. And then we have the oral cavity, so all of these sounds with these articulation, if the air goes out between the lips, it's an oral sound. If the air goes out through the nose, if this velum opens up this passage to the nose and so the air comes out here, then that's going to be a nasal sound. So let's walk through these places. Remember, place would be where in the mouth some kind of obstruction is occurring. The lips, the alveolar ridge, the palate, the velum, the glottis. So labial consonants would be ones where these two lips are coming together. You can see this in this diagram. So milk and mother both start with this labial sound, ma, 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 where you can hear two lips coming together. It's probably not a coincidence that the words for mother or nursing involve two lip sounds, as two lips are used in the nursing process for young babies. We have other labial sounds like ba and pa, which involve two lips coming together. There's labiodental consonants where we see the bottom lip is touching the top tooth. This would be f and v, f and v. We have dental consonants, which could be up here in languages like Spanish. Interdental is usually what we do in American English, where the tongue is actually almost going up between the two teeth. These would be the rarest English sounds and some of the rarest consonant sounds in the world. This would be our th and the. If you put your finger in front of your two lips and your tongue actually comes all the way out between the teeth to touch the finger, th or the, that's a good way of guaranteeing that you're producing an interdental sound, th and the. Alveolar consonants are consonants where the tongue touches the alveolar ridge. You could think of it as maybe the pizza ridge. It's the part of the top of your mouth that gets burnt, the skin gets burnt when you eat really hot pizza, and you can feel kind of the blistered skin there. Da, da, da. So these alveolar sounds would be da, ta, na, sa, la, ra. If you see that da, ta, na, la, sa, ra, that bony ridge behind your teeth that those are hitting. Post-alveolar sounds, or sometimes these are called alveolo-palatal sounds, would be part of your tongue tip is at that alveolar ridge, but the blade of your tongue is actually going up against this thing post it, behind it in your mouth. So it's all covering this area. This would be sh and zh. A true palatal sound would be up at the top here. That would be like ya, sh, cha, or ch, ch, zh, zh, sh, sh. These sounds up at the top of your mouth. We don't use them in English, but they're common in other languages. Velar sounds, this is where you can see the back of my tongue is reaching all the way toward the soft palate back here. And if I pronounce a ga or a ka, ga, ga, ka, ka, I can actually stick my finger all the way back through this opening and touch my palate, my hard palate, because the tongue has opened a clear path for me to do so. So this would be ka, ga, nga, ha, ra. Glottal sounds would be way deep down the throat. The vocal cords themselves, which were way down in the vocal tract, are causing the obstruction. So in the soft H sound, the vocal cords are totally open, air is just coming out, but those vocal cords are slowly vibrating. And then we have what's called a glottal stop. It looks like a backwards question mark. This is the apostrophe in Hawaiian, Hawaii. Hawaii is the glottal stop. It's the sound that we have in uh-oh, uh-oh. It's that glottal stop, or uh-uh, uh-uh. I don't want to do it, that sound. In English, sometimes it's optional at the beginning of a word. I could start the word apple with just a pure vowel, apple, apple. Or I could start it with that glottal stop, that consonant, apple, where I'm actually starting it with apple, apple, instead of apple, apple, which I wouldn't have it. And that's an interesting variation for learners to learn. Do you add that glottal stop to the beginning of a word with a vowel or not? So here's a list of those common places of articulation again. We have bilabial sounds with two lips, p, b, m. We have labiodental sounds, f, v. We have dental or interdental in the case of English sounds, th and the. A true dental would be like a Spanish da, 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 na, na, where it's up against only the top tooth and not the bottom tooth at all. Alveolar sounds would be t, d, n, s, z, l. There's different R versions here, ra, ra, or ra. Post-alveolar sounds would be sh and zh, or ch and j. Palatal would be ta, ja, sh, zh, ya, and nya. This is the N with the tilde over it in Spanish. Velar sounds k, g, h, r, nga. This would be like the ng thing in English, like a word like sing or eng, gur, the first a velar nasal. Uvular sounds we don't use in English, but they are used in other languages. Ka, so Al-Qaeda or Iraq or Qatar, the Middle Eastern countries, this Q is used in Arabic, obviously. Ka, ma, and this ra, ra is used in French and German as their version of the R sound. Glottal sounds would be that glottal stop, a voiceless fricative, and a voiced version, Labial velar would be wa. This is like, it's pronounced at both the double lips and at the velum at the same time. Wa, wa. It's a very tricky sound because your tongue is doing two things at once. And French has a version of this, a labial palatal sound, where it's the two lips and the palate at the same time. Like in oui or wheat. Mandarin Chinese has this as well. The word for moon or month is yue, yue. So the consonant at the beginning of that yue is this labiopalatal sound. This one is an English phrase. The at the beginning of this, because I said interdental sounds are very rare and are very tricky for people, in a lot of varieties of English, this interdental sounds get replaced with different ones. In South London, instead of this one, people say this one. This is an interdental, this is labiodental, so it's kind of adjacent. It has something in common with that. In French English, they would replace this the with a z, this one, because that's an alveolar sound, which is still pretty close to the double tooth sound that is represented in the. In Jamaican English, they would say dis one. This is alveolar, this is also alveolar. Again, it's pretty close. In Singaporean English, they would even pronounce it as a l, this one. And that is also an alveolar sound, which is a neighbor to the interdental. So when we have pronunciation issues, there's a very clear phonological or phonetic explanation for this. Usually they're pronouncing a sound which isn't exactly where it needs to be, but is pretty close to where it needs to be.